Bien, el siguiente ponente es un espacio dedicado para uno de nuestros patrocinadores, Accenture, y es Andy Goodman, el director general de Fjord. Fjord es una compañía una consultoría de diseño que fue adquirida por Accenture en mayo. Fundamentalmente va a hablar de cómo el diseño nos puede sacar de la crisis. Andy, please. Thanks.
Okay. Mic working? Yeah, good. We're up. There's a slightly newer version of this which they haven't got, so I might have to describe some of the slides that are missing, but nevertheless. So someone actually asked a question that referred to the crisis that we're all in. The economic crisis, maybe not the personal crisis we're all in. But I put together this talk really because I wanted to have I wanted to think about how design, specifically digital design, but not just digital design, how that can actually address the economics of countries and industries. And I think design is thought of in quite a limited way by most people outside the industry. What design actually does is it solves business problems. It's not just about making beautiful things. It's actually about solving problems that are in the world. And in our kind of commercial sector, it's about solving business problems. So I thought I'd start by talking about the crisis a little bit and about economics. So I found this article in the Guardian newspaper in the UK about 6 months ago, and it struck me for many reasons. But it's quite a controversial statement, really. It says, "Did cocaine use by bankers cause the global financial crisis?" This is actually from an interview with David Nutt, who, funny name, but he was the drug czar for the police force in the UK. And he's quite an extreme guy, but nevertheless, there's a lot of references outside of his statement that cocaine-using bankers got us into this mess. And they're easy to demonize, because, and someone as prestigious and serious as Alan Greenspan said that it was a culture of irrational exuberance that caused this crisis. And, it's not just about cocaine, although Bernie Madoff's office was known as the North Pole. It was actually the result of 30 years of deregulation. Well, that's one of the reasons. Essentially, overconfidence, not just brought about by cocaine use, but it's a symbol of it. That we seem to forget the lessons of the past over a period of time. We seem to think, well, we can't ever fall into those traps again. And it might be something to do with these guys. Now, this is Black and Scholes, or Scholes and Black, I don't know which one's which. But in 1973, they came up with a formula that essentially promised you can never lose money again. It was a very complex investment formula for trading. And it worked. It worked for 30 or 40 years. And it was very, highly complex, to the extent where people didn't actually understand how it worked, but it worked. It was like magic. And of course, it worked up to the point at which it stopped working. So reliance on complex systems is really dangerous. But also, we rely on not so complex systems. We make a lot of mistakes. So I'm not saying it was Microsoft that caused the crisis. That's the Excel logo. But actually, there was a very important paper written by Reinhardt and Rogoff, two Harvard academics, called Growth in the Time of Debt. And they essentially were saying, when you're in an economic crisis, you reduce spending. And this became a mantra. And if you look around Europe and the kind of economic policies that are in place now to deal with the crisis, this sort of response has become accepted wisdom. And what's interesting is, a couple of years ago, a PhD student who was using their actual Excel sheet discovered that they'd made a really important error in their calculations, which actually undermined the entire argument that cutting investment is not really the way to solve the crisis. And I guess we can see that around us. And so what happens in this situation? What's the actual response to the crisis? And what we see is that services get reduced in every aspect, and I mean in a very broad way. So in terms of frequency, quality, the number of staff, the level of training they have, all of these things get reduced. And this is where design starts coming in, because services can be designed in exactly the same way as a book or a booklet or an iPhone app or a building. So I decided to think of an experience that I've been having over the last few years where service reduction has led to this drop in quality. And I call this the new premium, because really what this reduction does is it actually starts eroding the experience that you're having, and you actually start having a low quality experience still for seemingly high prices. And I'm going to use an example now, and I hope there's no employees of this company in this room. And I want to say that this isn't a dig at Iberia. It's actually something that I personally have experienced. And I find it very, very troubling that a brand as important and as prestigious as Iberia has undergone this change. And of course, we all know what happened a couple of years ago is that they were merged with BA. And at the time, the chairman of British Airways said, this is going to be a great deal for British Airways. So what has happened, and these figures were from early in the year, 330 million cost saving, 15% cut in capacity, and nearly 4,000 people laid off. And this is basically what happens when you're dealing with this kind of mentality, this crisis mentality. And the sad thing is that the quality actually plummets. And you will find it probably amazing that as recently as last year, Iberia is now rated worse than Ryanair. Now, I don't think qualitatively there is a worse experience on Iberia compared to Ryanair, but it's all about expectation, because you know when you're going on Ryanair it's going to be a crap experience, and you're kind of trading that off. But when you travel on Iberia, you're expecting it to be good. And when you find out that you actually have to pay for your drink or your meal, and you haven't got as much legroom, and there's no TV in the back of the seat on a long-haul flight, that totally damages your perception of the brand. And in the end, it's the brand perception that's crucial here. And what happens... That's Richard Nixon, by the way. So what happens when trust gets eroded? Well, it's very, very hard to rebuild it. So the loss of faith we have in a brand, once the service quality drops, is catastrophic. And it's provable, actually, when we're looking at the bottom line, at the raw economics of how businesses are doing. This is a study done over a number of years by Harvard Business Review. And they refer to two different types of companies, myopic and non-myopic. That means short-sighted and not short-sighted. And they were looking at them over a period of 4 years. And essentially what they were saying was myopic companies are those that cut spending, what they call discretionary spending. So what discretionary spending is I found it a very strange thing. What they classified as discretionary was marketing and R&D. Now, I don't know what businesses you work in, but marketing and R&D to me seem pretty essential to how you run a business. But nevertheless, these are called discretionary. And the companies that cut those, what happens after the first year is their share price goes up, because inevitably their spending is going down, and the impact of that spending perhaps hasn't worked through the system. But over the course of 4 years afterwards, they dropped by a massive margin. So they dropped by around 20%. And the companies that keep investing in the crisis, those are the ones that actually maintain their share price and maintain their value in the market. Now, this is a hard message for people to actually take. I mean, if you think about it on a personal level, if you don't have much money, the idea of continuing to spend seems very counterintuitive. The same applies when you scale it up to companies, to countries, but sometimes the counterintuitive thing is the reality. And those companies that are brave enough to invest, and there are many examples of them throughout recent history, maybe even just the last 20 years, those companies that continue to invest when the general economic landscape is very poor, those are the ones that can gain a competitive advantage. Those are the ones that keep their customers and then can steal customers from other companies that have cut and have cut the quality of their services. And my belief is that design is at the heart of this, actually. That you can not just design better experiences, but you can design experiences that are actually going to help you improve the quality of what you offer to your customers, but also can help you save money, especially in the digital era. So there's a really good quote here from David Kester, who until last year was the CEO of the Design Council in the UK. And he says that it's an integrated approach using insights from design methods to guide business strategy. And for me, that's the critical part. Design guides business strategy. And if you think about some of the biggest companies over the last 10, 15 years, design has been very central to them. And what that does is it's shaping their product strategy. So it's not just about business or technology anymore. It's actually about design, understanding users, creating products and services that they want to use that actually drives the strategy. And it brings innovation into that firm based on an understanding of those users and the market requirements. And that's a very big change around from these monolithic, technocratic kind of companies that have been powerful in previous decades. If you look at Apple, they're it's designed in California, made in China, but the heart of where they are is in a design mentality. And actually, design-centric companies over the course of time perform better. So this graph, the grey line just shows the average of the Standard & Poor's 500, and the bigger graph shows what we define as design-centric companies. So we've selected them. And this actual study was done initially by David Kester, and we continued it at Fjord to go on for the next few years. And those kind of companies like Nike, like BMW, like Apple, they have design at the core of what they do. My light is flashing. Okay. So Mary Meeker, she's the queen of the internet. You might remember her. She's quite famous. And she's actually an investment banker. And she said something really remarkable last year in her public address, that the new disruptive world we're entering, the new transformative world, powered by new devices, connectivity, user interfaces, and beauty. And the last one is really significant because beauty isn't something you'd expect to hear from quite a hardcore business person as being a driver. But to us, it makes perfect sense at Fjord. And so I just want to show you quickly 3 examples. I might get kicked off before I manage to finish, but these are, I chose these specifically from projects we did from the financial services industry because that's a very interesting sector at the moment, and there's a lot of disruption starting to happen there. And the first example actually isn't from us, but it's from a concept called nudge. And nudge, this book was written a few years ago. It's the active engineering of choice, which sounds really creepy. But essentially what it's saying is you can change the way people behave by persuading them to do something in a slightly different way and by using psychological techniques. And the behavioural insights team from the UK government have taken this to heart, and they actually realised that if you send out the tax letters handwritten, or they did an experiment actually, but they realised that if you handwrite the envelopes, people are much more likely to pay their taxes, because what they realise is there's a human being at the other end of the chain. It's not just a machine printing out the labels and then sending them out. There's actually a human being there. And you'd think that's very expensive, handwriting millions and millions of letters, but for every £1 they invested, they collected £2,000 more tax because people were nudged into paying it. They felt kind of guilty, this person has spent their time writing me this letter. So the 3 design drivers that we bring to bear are simplicity, which means essentially minimally satisfying at lowest cost. And what that means is that whichever resource is scarcest to you, be it time, money, physical effort, non-routine behavior, whichever of those is the most expensive to you makes the act most complex. And so by understanding the motivation of users, we can design simple services. And this is a really interesting example, because this is what we've been working on for Barclays in Spain and Portugal, and in fact the rest of Europe. And this is a response to them needing to cut their spending in Europe, because they're a niche bank here. Their property is very expensive, training and hiring staff is very expensive, and keeping them standing around in bank branches all day is very inefficient. So them mobilizing all of their services onto iPads, they're sending these out with relationship managers, salespeople, really, who can go out and sign up a new customer in 15 minutes using an iPad. And that would have taken 45 minutes before. So we help them design this service that can scan an ID card, that has a biometric signature, that has an OCR, so you can just take a photograph of someone's bill, and it sucks all the data out of those and automatically sets up the account. So this is a very innovative service, but it's a response to a need to cut costs, and it simplifies the entire process. The second thing we help our customers do is we help them disrupt their own markets, because actually they're all being disrupted anyway, and now banks are being disrupted. And we've developed this service for Guarantee Bank in Turkey called iGuarantee, and it's a very interesting situation because Turkey has a very young population, tech savvy. They're 23 years old on average, compared to UK is 37. So incredibly young population. And this iPhone app brings together social media, location services, payments, couponing, all in this kind of quite strange-looking interface for a bank. It's very colourful, it's got avatars, it's got voice control, so you can actually tell it to transfer money to your friend, and it'll link through to their Facebook profile, and if they're a guarantee customer, you can actually just send them money by linking through Facebook. And that's really revolutionary stuff. No bank in the world is doing that yet. And then the final thing we do, and I will get off soon, I promise, is beauty. And we've been working with BBVA in Spain for the last 4 years, essentially designing all of their digital touch points, and they're starting to get into the market now. And we were really amazed, because our client, when we first started working with them, the iPad had more or less just come out, and he said it's 80% about beauty. And I've never had a client tell me that before, especially not a banking client. So that was a remarkable thing to say. But the beauty isn't just there for its own sake. After working with them on their iPhone apps and their tablet and TV even here, we've helped them transform their business. And they've gone from being a middle-ranking digital bank to being one of the references in the market. And it's not just fame, they're actually massively moving their operations into customers' hands, into mobile. And this is a huge transformation. And then the final thing I want to show is that we design for love, which sounds very sweet, but actually the relationship you build with your customers is like a relationship of love. It's not the wow effect. The wow is like sex, and love is like a marriage. And you want to have marriages with your customers, not just a one-night stand. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Andy. Do you have any questions for Andy? Yes, over there. Oye. Levantad un poco más la mano porque no... Gracias.
Hi. Guarantee was bought by BBVA, so basically not the same bank, but why do they have such different interfaces for the clients? It's just because of the age difference and the country difference. Can't BBVA go to a better user interface like Guarantee has?
Well, you kind of answered your own question. The visual culture in Turkey is very, very different to Western Europe. It's kind of, in a way, Turkey's a very interesting country because it's half in Asia and it's half in Europe. And so if you look at the branding of the companies there, they're a bit eye-popping. Very bright colors, kind of strange cartoon animals in logos of some of their most prestigious brands. And I think that Spain is much more aligned with the kind of European design aesthetic. So, you know, companies are very protective of their brands. You have to work within certain guidelines. You have to create a consistent look and feel. And for BBVA, you know, they're blue, like a lot of banks, and they have a certain seriousness about them that you have to respect, I think. So, yeah, I wouldn't say we would take any of the design cues from Turkey and bring them here. I don't think they would work. In the same way that if we took design cues from China or Japan, they wouldn't work in Europe either.
¿Alguna otra cuestión? No? I have a very silly question.
Yes.
You mentioned trust, and you say the crisis can be an antidote for crisis as well. Design can be an antidote for crisis. But according to most surveys, one of the problems that we have in our society today is that people don't trust in politics, in politicians. How can design solve that?
Oh, well, there's some things design can't solve. I mean, in the end, we're often faced with choosing between, you know, who you dislike least in politics. Very rarely does a political position represent how an individual really feels. I'm not going to talk about revolutions or anything like that, but they do happen. I think the idea of crowdsourcing is one way. The previous speaker talked about crowdsourcing, but I think that technology is now allowing us to perhaps understand in a quite instantaneous way how people feel about issues. And maybe if, you know, in the end, politicians will do what people tell them to, even if they're, you know, have their agenda and it's very limited. But I think the more we understand in an instantaneous way what people's responses are, I think we can have a better system. But, you know, I'm not here to talk about politics.
Thanks, Andy. Thank you very much.
All right, then. Thank you.
Thank you. De nuevo, ahora tenéis tiempo para sentaros, las que estáis en el pasillo otra vez. Esto es como los toros o como el teatro, ¿no? Durante la faena no se sienta uno.